Travel and Things, in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions, presents In Conversation With. I am your host, David Batsoffen, and my guests today are back again, but this time with a different book. My guests, Andrew Ray, Peter Neville, welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having us, David.
It seems like only yesterday that we were talking about African predators. And here we are with a brand new book called Memoirs of a Safari Guide, and this time illustrated to boot.
Yes. Yeah, not by us, because we can't draw for.
No, illustrated by Russell Jones, who was invited to join us, but unfortunately is busy elsewhere today. So he's unable to be here with us on Zoom. Peter, I know that you are in Zagreb in Croatia. And Andrew, I believe you're down on the South Coast. So we spread far and wide, but this is the type of book that brings everybody together, specifically sitting around a fire. Who wants to kick it off with a who wants to tell me about the baboon story?
Which one?
The one where you had to apologize to your tracker.
Oh yeah. No, that's a good one. That's when I was had a lot more hair on my noggin,
right?
And a lot less experience. But yeah, it involved baboons elevated in the tree that they were slumbering in, and me being a greenhorn guide at a lodge, hearing the noise of the tree above us and thinking I'd discovered something amazing, and told the tracker to shine the spotlight upward. Tracker, who's done this all his life, knew exactly what it was, and he knew exactly the result of doing what he was about to do, and he kept shaking his head, and I kept insisting as this new greenhorn guide, and the tracker eventually did my bidding, and baboon feces rained down upon the parade, all over my guests and myself in the vehicle. So yeah, that's in the book.
You didn't do that again.
Never again. No. That's lessons learned the hard way.
Always is when it comes to bush
absolutely
encounters, you know.
Absolutely. And most of us, you know, you can hear from an experienced oak, don't do this, don't do that. Most of us are still silly enough to try it for ourselves first.
if you want to test that theory to the nth degree, Andrew, put a sign that says wet paint anywhere in a public area, and somebody's going to touch to see if it is.
That's precisely right. Yeah.
The UK will take that as an instruction.
Yeah. Peter, what is your involvement with the book?
Well, I think you can thank COVID for the production of these two books.
Right.
You know, it struck us all. We're all laid low, wondering how on earth we're ever going to get outside, let alone run safaris again. And so my mind kind of turned to thinking, well, okay, you know, we can all write, we can all do stuff at home. And Andrew and I have got this, you know, myriad of stories that, you know, you think, oh, one day when I retire, I'll get all this on, you know, and of course, you know, most people never do, but this was a golden opportunity for us to, you know, scan through our histories and our experiences and get things down. So African Predators was a kind of month by month look at wild felids and canids in Africa. And brush up on our biology for ourselves as much as the reader, and to get some of our stories in there, some of our experiences with individual species. But of course, you know, we have these other crazy things like Andrew just described with the baboons that are what make a safari. You know, if you put yourself out there and you try things are going to happen.
Yes.
It's made all the more lovely by the fact that you've got a group of people with you who are relying on you to show them the world of Africa and show them the animals. And of course, they're going to cop for some of those experiences too. But those are the things that make their trip. You know, we try very hard to make our safaris at Ray Safaris much more than simply looking down binoculars and looking off the side of the vehicle. But we meet people, we get to see and sort of rub shoulders with some of the animals that people want to see.
Literally and figuratively.
Literally. Indeed. Yeah, we're helping with conservation activities with specialized groups such as the rhino protection people. And so our guests do get up close and personal, which means, of course, they do get a bit smelly sometimes, and they do get a bit dusty, and they get quite tired.
That's part of the joy. I mean, you pull up at a wild dog sighting, and if they're not doing anything, if those dogs are just lying there, they stink to high heaven.
Absolutely.
But the stench disappears after a while. You get used to it. But people who come from an urban setting, who have never seen a wild dog or never smelt a wild dog before, for them it's a lot like let's just go back to camp and have a G&T or something. We don't want to be sitting here.
The tooth and claw and stink of nature.
Exactly that.
One of the stories in Memoirs of Safari Guide is when Andrew and I took a kind of specialist veterinary and dog specialist behavior and training group into Namibia to help with the health checks of a captive African wild dog group they have there, which is part of their overall conservation program and release program. But they have to do annual health checks, which means they have to be darted. So my partner Stella, who is, you know, absolutely dog mad and loves wild dogs and always has done, but had never seen one in the wild. She'd never been to Africa until she had the misfortune to meet up with me. But you know, one of the faces that I remember on her is that having darted these wild dogs, she was then charged with putting on a rubber glove and collecting a stool sample as part of the study. So, you know, it's an abiding memory, of course, and it's very well described, but extremely well illustrated by our cartoonist Russell Jones in the book.
By Russ, I've had to do that with leopard feces, and it's not fun at all.
It's not pleasant.
Really?
I was quite surprised how good she was at it.
It's a crappy job, but somebody has to do it, Peter.
that was an abiding subject on that particular safari, because it wasn't much later, when we were traveling the rest of Namibia after the wild dog focus thing, that we ended up at the big fur seal colony north of Swakopmund and Henties Bay at Cape Cross. And we had some serious folk sort of controlling their gag reflexes quite seriously around there as well. So I mean, that was a smelly safari from start to finish, as I recall.
Absolutely. And Russell, of course, being a cartoonist, he sees the world rather differently to everybody else.
Well, I mean, look at that.
It does.
Honey badgers will do that to a lion. I mean, they have no shame, those animals, and they are as tough as nails. They really
absolutely.
They will take your face off in a heartbeat if you get in their way. How many of these stories have been, I don't want to say, because it's wrong of me to say, over the eons that you've been doing Ray Safaris, Andrew, how many of these stories have become a tad embellished? You know, let's take like a lone buffalo suddenly has become a herd of Duggar boys that chased you for kilometers and kilometers. And in fact, they sort of sauntered past you and glared at you.
Well, I think one in the telling and the retelling of stuff, you know, a certain poetic license does start to creep in, particularly as these stories have been regaled and retold and performed, if you will, around countless fires on safari over the last. You know, I've been doing this nearly 30 years, and Ray Safaris for over 8 years. So yeah, I think there's been quite a lot of. I would say there's some embellishment. I think in trying to extract in the retelling of it, certainly the humor that gets everybody giggling around the fire. When you're transposing that onto a page, there's a trick to that, because you haven't got a nitwit like me, you know, gesticulating and stuff and telling the story.
When's the video version of this book coming out?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea, actually. But yeah, I think over time, I think we do add some titillating little bits that make it sort of flow better. But what's in there more or less happened. Let's put it that way.
The opening.
I have to disagree slightly. You know, all my stories are entirely as they happen. With one exception, and that is that the couple on their honeymoon
with the bush babies looking down.
The bush babies.
So the poor lady looked up, and there's pairs of eyes lined up on the beam looking down at her. And in actual fact, there weren't 5. there were 4.
Oh.
You needed that extra one, did you?
Just added it. Just 5 sounded like a big crowd, you know. 4 sounded like a humble gathering.
But now I've got a bone to pick with you, Andrew. You mentioned the scream of a rock hyrax, of a dassie being so terrifying. Bush babies, if you've never heard them before, and they unexpectedly scream in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah.
Make you sit bolt upright in whatever you're sleeping in, be it a sleeping bag on the ground or a 5-star lodge, you will wake up very fast.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I would put bush babies on a par, certainly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I've never heard a hyrax scream, but now I wanted to come back before Peter was talking about the marital couple to the do you need 2 chefs? The story about the biscuit. Would you care for a biscuit?
Peter tells that best.
I do like that. So regale us, Peter. I'm not going to spoil it.
It's actually a story told by Stephen Fry, the great British comedian and raconteur, I think we could describe him as now. He's into so many things. But he describes how during the First World War, various people were employed to go around the country estates to recruit men to basically go and be shot in the trenches, but to fight for their country. You'd never get away with that now, would you? No one would go. But
no, come knock on the door and say, "Will you die for your country?" Two words will come off the intercom. The second one will be you.
Anyway, so this inspector went around the whole estate and then came back and had a word with Lord Bottomley or whatever his name was, and said, "Well, okay," he said, "I understand that your Grace needs 38 men in the fields, and they're producing food for the population and the soldiers. So that's all war effort. And I understand that you need, so many people in the large house to cater for all the important meetings that go on here with the politicians and the generals and so on." He said, "So, I can see that you need 10 upstairs maids and 20 downstairs, doing all the laundry. And then there's the kitchen, and you have your chef and your sous chef, and then there's all the washers up." He said, "But I wonder if your Grace, it seems that you have 2 pastry chefs. And we wonder whether you wouldn't mind sparing one for the war effort." To which His Grace replied, "Oh, damn it, man. Can't a man have a biscuit?"
That is so incredibly entitled and posh.
It sounds like the British aristocracy is at its absolute worst, but there is another side to it, perhaps, that he was just trying to protect the guy from being blown to smithereens.
Exactly. But now, Andrew, you went on to call your Land Rover biscuit. Was it as a result?
Well, don't say the word Land Rover around us. That's a dirty word. It's a Land Cruiser.
Land Cruiser. The real thing. Sorry. Manufactured by the other person.
Yes. Yeah.
What awful people.
I'm sorry, I forget how deep the enmity runs between those 2 brands.
I could regale you with several jokes now about Land Rovers, but I'll refrain.
I was going to say, should there not be another book called Memoirs, a safari guide to towing Land Rovers?
Yeah, there you go. Stuff like that. There's actually they're in the ads for the new Defender. They're selling them together with a Jack Russell, because nobody should ever walk home alone. So I'll stop before I get started.
And that's also why the rear windows are heated, so your hands don't get cold when you push them.
There you go. Yeah. So the cruiser that Peter and I acquired together as an asset for a Race Safaris in its early sort of budding stages came in this beige kind of khaki bush sort of color. And this prompted this concept of naming her Biscuit. And Peter acquired the idea for that from the story he's just told you. So then over time we've added to the fleet, and of course we've kept the same subject matter going. So the second Land Cruiser is called Cake, and we bought my daughter, who works in my office, a little RAV4, and I think that's called Tart or Muffin or something like that. Anyway, it's gone.
Crumpet, something like that.
It's a wonderful story, and it's a great icebreaker when you've got new guests.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know, you
absolutely.
can say that, let me just go and get the tart, and they either expect you to arrive with
exactly
with something to eat, or a
yes,
woman in tow,
or something else.
or something else.
Indeed.
Yeah. Let's not get sexist here. We're going to get into trouble. Let's stick
Indeed.
with the book. Firstly, who's published this? Was it another self-published book?
Go ahead, Peter.
No. Well, we published it basically. Ray Safaris published it.
Okay.
Because it is a very African-focused book. We hope it will have broader appeal as time goes on, and that people in the UK and the US will also enjoy it. But by and large, we felt it is a very particular book for Africa and safaris and safari goers. You know,
well, I was going to say, this is such a generic is incorrect, but you know what I mean. That you almost, when people sign up to come on one of your safaris, this should be built into the cost. So when they arrive, there's one on the bed.
It is signed by the authors. Sure.
There you go. And they get to meet them as well.
Yeah, we're a 2-book safari company now. You know, there are people who write books and take you on safari.
Yeah. In that order.
Indeed.
Andrew, your favorite story in the book?
Oh wow. I'd have to say, I mean, there's a lot of them. The one that continues to have me giggling when I think about it is the very neurotic couple that checked into the lodge that my wife and I managed in the Timbavati. We managed a luxury tented camp there in the 20 odd years ago, and this very, very nervous, neurotic couple checked in, first time in Africa, first time on safari. They'd literally just arrived from a trip down from the Highveld and from the airport straight into the middle of nowhere, and incredibly nervous. I mean, just every little squeak and rustle in the bush would have them turning around and yeah, nervous as heck. And we found out along the way that it was very much a keeping up with the Joneses kind of safari. They weren't really wildlife people or into that kind of experience, but because neighbors of theirs had done it and had raved about it, they figured, we better do this. It's a thing to do. And it was winter, and winter in the bush can be quite chilly, especially if you're sleeping in something canvas and not brick and mortar. And what our housekeeping folk would do is that when they did turn downs while everybody was in the boma having dinner, they would put the hot water bottles into the beds. And so when folk arrived, preheated bed, beautiful. So Mr. and Mrs. Nervous get escorted down to the tent, as is our way. So I mean, that's got them all fired up, because here's a guy with a rifle and a torch that's going to take you now to your place of slumber. So they're all on high alert, and they get into the room and we zip them in and we say, right, see you in the morning. And it wasn't long, and the air horn and the various alarm systems that we place in the tents for times of danger, should they happen, are sounded, and there's screaming and there's shrill kind of people losing their minds, and we all run down armed to the teeth, ready to take on some man-eating leopard or enraged elephant bull or whatever. And we find this really interesting scene, and what had happened was they'd arrived inside the tent, and now they're thinking about bed, and they noticed these two lumps in the bed. and what's crawled into our bed, so they in the corner of the tent is a basket that's got walking sticks and umbrellas and things in it, knob kiris, etc. And so one of these items, I think it was a brolly or a kiri maybe, was taken as a weapon. But initially the sort of prodding took place, and of course our hot water bottle's got that lovely kind of liquid movement, so it looks alive. And of course this then prompted a thorough thrashing of said water bottles with the knobkerrie. Of course, one of them eventually bursting, and now the guy thinks he's killed whatever it is, and it's bleeding into the bed. And we all arrive coming in with heavy caliber firearms, going, "Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? What do we kill?" And this guy's he's beside himself. The guy was shaking like he had some sort of weird fever. And there was this big spreading wet stain on the bed. And all of this went down, because so obviously policy at the camp changed. We started handing water bottles to people as they left for bed from then onwards. But that one I'll never forget. And I seem to recall that they may have checked out a day or two early. I think it was too much for them, for their nerves. So that one I recall vividly, and it still puts a smile on the dial, and it's it shows you that as amazing as these experiences are that we offer, it's not everybody's cup of tea. No, certainly, safaris don't appeal to everyone.
You're not expecting a hot water bottle in your bed. A little bug can trigger that type of thing. Peter, do you have a favorite story in here?
Yeah, I have a couple, but I think inevitably they're always based around fear. And the relief that follows when you survive some incredible danger is what makes people laugh in hindsight. But I'm sure Andrew's folks, there will be telling the story of, how they were savaged by a hot water bottle, if they ever tell the story. But for me, way back, I was camping out on Amboseli, on the flats below Amboseli, below Kilimanjaro on Amboseli, and we had all the braai set up, and we were cooking everything going, and the tables were up and the salads were in, and then suddenly we heard the approach of a clan of hyenas, and they were getting noisier and closer, and we just leapt, 7 of us, into the back of the nearest 4x4. So we're all crammed in and pulling the door shut, terrified actually, because these things just came marauding in, turned over everything and ate everything, of course, and chewed up the pots, and then sort of sauntered off. And then when we finally dared in the dark to open the door and inspect the damage, then we started laughing.
This is always the case, because I've been in several similar situations with baboons, with jennets, with all sorts of stuff, where I've either been in a lodge and the baboons joined me while I'm working, or a jennet's come to eat my welcome platter. And in the moment, it's terrifying. And then the first time you tell the story, you realize that it is actually funny. It wasn't at the split instant that it happened, but 10 minutes later, and you sort of go, well, I've now got another anecdote. I've now got another article for the magazine I write for, type of thing.
It's actually what creates the addiction to going on safari.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it, Peter, because no two safaris are ever the same. I'm sure you guys find this, and it's not sort of a story, it's just an observation, is people will go out on a game drive and they'll come back and you'll say to them, so what did you see? And they go, no, we saw nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
And you go, hang on a second, did you see a giraffe? Yes. Did you see zebra? Yes. Did you see impala? Yes. So you didn't see nothing. You didn't see any of the big five, or that's what you meant to say, because you never go out on safari and not see anything. I mean, we just come back from a trip to Sabi Sands, and we had the most awesome sighting, never to be repeated. I bet you neither of you guys, Andrew, in your 30 years, Peter, in all your time as a ethologist, I bet you've never had this sighting. Ask me what or who it was.
Go on.
We painted breath.
Sir Richard Branson. He was at his lodge with his family.
Yes.
So he was, and you could see he was. The story I tell about it, because it's now formed part of my storytelling, was that you could see he had that look on his face, was, go on, ask me if I am. And we didn't. We just waved and said hello and carried on as if he was just a regular safari guest.
No, you've got it the wrong way around there, David. Actually, he was saying to his family, is that David Batsoffin?
Exactly. That's exactly what was
happening. Funny you should say that, because he and I did work together, but many years ago, and he wouldn't remember me. Oh, I don't think he would. I didn't have the beard. I was a lot younger and a lot slimmer, as Andrew was saying, and I had a lot more hair. So I don't think he'd remember me. Would have been funny if he did. if I'd pointed at him and he'd pointed at me and gone, Richard, David.
Well, I tell you what, you can go from the rich and famous, and I think actually my favorite story is still involving a humble gecko.
The cleavage gecko.
The cleavage gecko.
There we go.
The cleavage gecko, where you got, you're sitting around a fire, and you're sitting back in the chairs, and my dear friend, or our dear friend Wendy, was sat back underneath the lamp, just inside the lapa, with her feet spread towards the fire, and she suddenly leapt to her feet, screaming, and just ran straight across the fire. I mean, it was astonishing, and she's sort of patting at herself, and my brother, who was with me, and I were kind of, what on earth has happened? And it turns out that unusually a gecko that was hunting insects around the lamp had lost his grip and had done a perfect dive straight down her ample cleavage. And of course, my brother and I, once we realised what had happened, was you don't quite know what to do. You can't say, can I get that? Or can I help? Can I help you?
It lead to a whole different series of stories.
Again, from absolute terror, by when you had no idea what had happened, to half an hour later, just dying with laughter about the whole thing.
I'm assuming, guys, that there are still many more stories. There's more than one book of stories in your repertoire.
I mean, I think there are. I mean, I think there was a first salvo. We're also expanding our horizons in terms of the places the frontiers we go and explore. And so I don't think this is the end of our book writing efforts. I think as we gather stories and as we gather experiences in new landscapes, I think we'll be producing some more stuff, whether it's irreverent and fun stuff like this, or perhaps we've got a serious book in us. I'm not sure yet, but certainly the adventure ain't over, and I don't think the writing is either.
Oh, that's wonderful to know. Is the book currently, as we used to say, is it available at all good bookstores? We're just about to run out of time, so we're going to have to wrap.
Sure.
Talking to you guys it just runs away. The book is available currently online in the bookstores.
Peter, where are we with online? I think we're still putting that together.
We're nearly there. We're nearly there on Amazon Kindle, but it's available in South Africa in every good bookstore and through Willow Trading. If you go on, you can buy it online as a hard copy. We're hoping that the hard copy version will spread around the world, but for the moment, it's launched in South Africa. But I would imagine we'll have the Amazon Kindle version out by mid-January.
Great stuff.
And read it in the bar.
Time has just flown by, as with the last book. It's wonderful to chat to you. I wish you both a wonderful festive season, however you're going to be spending it, and I look forward to chatting and perhaps even traveling with you in 2023. Guys, have a great festive break. You take care now, and thanks for joining me once again here on In Conversation with my guests, Andrew Ray and Peter Neville, and we've been chatting about their book, Memoirs of a Safari Guide. It's illustrated by Russell Jones, and it's a great Christmas gift. And if nobody wants to buy it for you, buy it for yourselves. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Happy Christmas.
Thanks, David.